Andy, is Tony coming?
No, he's not in, Jan is not as well, so. Michael's jumped into the frying pan here.
No worries.
Okay. Everybody ready? Sheila? Greetings, everybody. I would like to bring this meeting of Southern Shores Planning Board, May 15th, 2023. If you all will stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Michael Zenner. He is agreed to be an alternate on the planning board. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Appreciate you signing on.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Look forward to your expertise.
Thank you.
Okay. We've got an agenda before us tonight. Is everybody okay with it? And I'll entertain a motion to accept or approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. Approval of minutes. Same thing. They are from February 2023. Any corrections that were noted on those? I had a couple of typos. Actually had these done and forgot to turn them in today, but before noon, so. Anyway, line 106, board members to provide rather than pride input. Now I would say on line 143, planning board member Collins commented, and maybe put that in quotes. I think that was about all I saw, Wes. Did anybody else have anything for Wes? Corrections? Okay. All right, well, I will take a motion to approve minutes of February 22nd, 2023. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second, Michael. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. We've got public comment period now, and I know there's some people here that would like to speak to a couple of issues. And I would just say, if you have general public comment, please step forward. If not, when we start into the agenda, the ZTAs, I will ask the applicants to come forward. So any general comment from anybody before we get going?
Will we be able to comment fairly specific?
No, the applicant, if you're a party to anything, you can speak to it when we're doing the individual ZTAs that are before us. But if you want to speak now or afterwards, we have two public comment periods, but we will have voted on everything in the second comment period. Yeah, we're not going to keep you from speaking. Okay, well, first item of business under old business is ZTA 2208, and I'm going to ask Wes if he will kind of give us a brief synopsis of what we're looking at tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, members of the board. I'm going to go through most of the staff report for the benefit of the folks that are here that may have not had an opportunity to read it. So the first item on the agenda is ZTA-22-08. The applicant is Pleasure Palace CDEC Incorporated. The applicant's representative is KCC Varnell. The requested action is amendment of the town zoning ordinance by amending sections 36-57 and section 36-207B. The applicant is proposing a ZTA to amend those sections to allow for shared space occupancy dwellings, or SSO in short, as a permitted use in the C General Commercial Zoning District. The application was submitted on June 17, 2022, but the applicant withdrew the application from the July 18, 2022 Planning Board meeting agenda. The proposed language defines shared space occupancy dwelling as a private structure in which shared spaces are offered for rent for the purpose of providing affordable sleeping accommodations, payable in money, and other consideration to persons who do not meet the definition of family. Each shared space offered for rent within the structure may accommodate up to 10 bunk units, maximum of 20 occupants. Each shared space offered for rent within the structure shall exist within the confines of 4 walls and separate and apart from any other shared space within the structure. Residents of the SSO shall share a kitchen facility and common living area with all other residents, and shall share a bathroom facility with 1 or more other residents. The owner of the SSO shall not use the dwelling comprising the SSO as their primary residence. SSO does not include dormitory and residence halls, single-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, motels, or vacation cottages. The proposed requirements for shared space occupancy dwellings are: A, there shall be 1 parking space for every 7 residents. The parking of any motor vehicle shall only occur in a designated parking space. B, bathroom facilities shall be provided which accommodate separate use by males and females. C, the owner of the SSO shall obtain the requisite permit or permits from the Dare County Health Department. D, the owner of the SSO shall be responsible for ensuring that residents are at all times in compliance with all town code regulations, including the town noise ordinance. And lastly, E, the town of Southern Shores may complete periodic inspections of the SSO to ensure the SSO is providing for the health and safety of the occupants. Since Town Code Section 36-207B11 was established after the application was submitted, the proposed amendment to Town Code Section 36-207B should consist of the addition of 12 instead of 11 as shown in the application. That's just kind of a side note. The town's currently adopted land use plan, policy 2, is applicable to the proposed ZTA. In staff's recommendation, the applicant seeks to provide affordable housing for J1 work visa students and others in need of affordable housing. During your consideration, questions and discussions should mainly focus on the ZTA and not on a specific property, as it would apply to all lots in the town's C General Commercial Zoning District. Policy 2 of the town's land use plan establishes the commercial district as a small district for convenience, shopping, and services. The land use plan also establishes that incompatible uses in the commercial area are limited to residential low density, educational, and conservation activities. Since the proposed use would consist of high density housing in the C General Commercial Zoning District, town staff believes that the proposed amendments are consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan. However, given the potential impacts of the proposed use on adjacent properties, town staff recommends that the board recommend disapproval of the application to the town council unless the proposed use is proposed as a special use. As a special use, a public hearing would be required and notice of the hearing would be sent to all adjacent property owners, as opposed to an administrative approval without providing an opportunity for public input and without the ability to impose reasonable and appropriate conditions and safeguards. That concludes my staff report, Mr. Chairman. If there are any questions, I can try to answer them
Okay.
as they relate to the staff report.
Before I ask the applicant to come up, does anybody have any questions for Wes? I don't. Okay. Well, I would ask that if the applicant or the applicant's representative would care to come forward and speak to this.
Good evening. Good to see you guys again. I think I've been in front of all of you, Mike, at least. Not on this board, but down in Nags Head. So good to see all you guys as always. Clearly, we're here trying to, and I do believe Ms. Pledger's statement, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, was attached to our application, just to give you guys kind of an idea of what the purpose is behind what we're proposing. We know definition itself reads affordable. That is within there. Wes and I discussed that. I agree. I thought that was a good idea to add in the definition itself as far as the cost of rent, because the proposal here is designed to put a dent, and that's all we can possibly do with affordable housing out here, in my humble opinion. I mean, there's no solution that's going to cure and rid us of our affordable housing issue. However, we do believe if you've got a building that's the size of Miss Pledger's here, if it can accommodate, even if it's in a one room with bunks, that's going to accommodate, say, 20 people, that if you can do that feasibly, and then again, not have it, let's say, aid to the folks who just want to make money. For example, it's why we've excluded single family residents from the definition. It's why we put in the definition that any occupants cannot meet the definition of family. The idea here is to provide for our workforce. Also for J1 students, as you noted in Ms. Pledger's statement, it's a very critical thing here. And Ms. Pledger knows for a fact, based on conversations with business associates throughout the Outer Banks, that J1 housing is still an issue. We still have situations where folks are going, and I'm not necessarily knocking them, but folks are taking a 6-bedroom home and they're putting 24 people in there, which is double what the septic would allow for. We're trying to prevent those type situations. We're not trying to create a scenario here where someone could go in, build a monster home, rent this out to family for seasonal rental or weekly short-term vacation rental, and then have the owner profit. The idea here is that we want to try to do something to put a dent in what we see, and I believe what the county in the overall sees as, again, a more affordable housing scenario. Just a couple notes here. I am going to let Ms. Pledger speak just about, assuming she wants to, but about her personal endeavor in this matter. However, I will note that there are a few outstanding issues in case that's in your mind right now. We fully acknowledge, and that's why it's within there, that we're going to have to get septic approval. We have been in conversations with the county. We've met with several individuals there. They've informed us of our options, and we intend to pursue those options, of course, in the event that this were to be approved. There's an issue with, potentially at least, that I've seen raised with the fact that Martins Point Commercial has covenants on them, okay? And that's, if the covenants indeed, I've not done an exhaustive search yet on what the covenants do and do not require, mainly because I don't want to have my client spend a whole bunch of money with me to go give some fancy legal opinion if there's no shot in even moving forward with it. No need to put the cart before the horse. But what I can say is this: we would acknowledge that, while at the same time acknowledging that, as you guys well know, towns don't enforce restrictive covenants between private property owners. So, But again, though it's not your issue, we acknowledge that if we have to address it, we would be addressing that as well. Pointing out, I guess I'll now speak to, what surprised me a little bit there, I don't think I read your proposal, the special use recommendation here. I was explaining to my client the difference in what we proposed, which is a permitted use, and then the special use. You guys know what it is. I don't have to do that. But what I would note on that is sometimes special use permits can get in the way of really good things. I've seen it happen with the two towns I represent. What I'll note, though, is that in the C1, in this particular district we're proposing, if you think about the layout, if you think about the size of it, if you think about the structures that currently exist there, not that other things can't be constructed, but this is something that most properties are not going to qualify for. Most properties are not going to fall into this particular definition or even be capable of falling into this definition. That's why in the first place, I did ask for it to be a permitted use, to save money, to save time, of course, for citizens and applicants, for business owners, in trying to make such an endeavor. However, we're at your guys' mercy. I did, however, want to speak to the fact that if it remains as a permitted use, I do not see, first off, you've got a fantastic town planner here who's going to take the conditions that are already placed or put on the what we're now proposing as this new use. There's already conditions that we're asking be built into the covenants. We believe those conditions are sufficient to counteract any potential town concerns. And with your planner administrating his code the way he does, I know that those conditions would be followed. That, coupled with the fact that this is what I believe to be at least very limited in application now and in the future, because of, again, the size and layout of the C1 district here in Southern Shores. So with all due respect to Mr. Haskett, of course, what I'd ask is that it be approved as a permitted use. But again, that's something that is for you guys to decide. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Well,
Thank you so much for indulging and taking the time to allow me to speak this afternoon. I initially hired my counsel to represent me, not that I could not speak for myself, but it was just the fact that I just wanted to make sure that I do everything right. I have always, since I have had my business here in Southern Shores, I feel like, and from what I have been told, that I have been a stellar business owner in the community. As you noted earlier, the project was put on the table. Actually, it was put on the table back in 2019. And then we removed it from the table because the building is a 7,700 square foot educational facility, as you are very much aware of. And so it was a proposal that had came to me at the last minute after Casey had already presented it to leave it an educational facility because their county is still saying that they're very much short of quality childcare. Of course, that deal fell through that they presented. So I took it off, then COVID hit, so I didn't do anything else. Then when I came back, I moved to Charlotte. And so I was getting phone calls about the facility constantly, even if I came back and opened it up as a summer camping, which I did. And then it was presented to me to allow the building to be used for putting some J1 students in there because several of the businesses did not have anywhere for these students to stay. I would not allow that because I want to do things right. I know there's a lot of people that do things underhandedly under the table and then ask for forgiveness later. I don't feel, I'm that person that I teeter on the other end. I want to come to you and say, okay, what do we need to do in order to make this building viable for J1 students and, workers that come into the area that is affordable for them. So it's not about me making all the money. It's not about me curing the problem. It's about me doing my part as a business owner in Dare County. And if everybody does their little part, then maybe we can put this pie together. So that is what I am trying to do. I am not trying to take a building that I have and throw a bunch of students in it and then not give them a reasonable place to live in. I have, when I came to Casey, I do my research before I do anything. And I said, we cannot just put anything there. I said, if we're going to do this, then we're going to do it correctly. So I started doing research. I'm connected with people that are housing J1 people. I'm connected with some people where the J1 students are actually typing in and listening their concerns that they have. And their biggest complaint is that, they're paying all of this money. And I mean, they're not even, as the code allows, 50 square foot apart. I mean, some of them, as I showed Casey, are not even a good, 4 foot apart. So when I'm presenting this building and what I'm trying to present, my philosophy in everything has been, we stay ready so we don't have to get ready. Does that make sense? So it's one of those things that I'm trying to create an environment that if for some reason, God forbid, that we have another pandemic or something like that right now, we don't have to deal with the issues of what's going on and how we're going to handle it, because we're going to be ready just like we were ready when this pandemic came. I have tried. People are calling me and they're still saying, Ms. Pledger, please leave the facility, an educational facility. I have tried for 2 years to leave it that way. Actually, it's been going on almost 3 years. And I'm a very business-oriented individual, and someone's not just going to be able to come in that building and just run it like a normal facility. They have to have a business mind behind them. And so therefore, after speaking with all these people, the only thing I could see is to take it to the next level. You're calling it housing. Casey's shared living. It is still an educational facility, simply because these J1 students are coming from all across the world, and they're the fuel of our economy. That is what everyone says. But if they're the fuel of our economy, then why can't we give them decent housing? That is all I'm trying to do, is take what we need in Dare County. And when we hire and bring these people over here, that they have a decent place to live. Again, I cannot solve the whole problem. I can only do my part. And I hope that you will help me do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pledger.
We'll both stand for any questions. If there are.
Yeah, we may have a few. I want to remind the board, and thank you for, giving us your perspective on your building. But what we have to remember is this is not specific to your property. This is going to be for the entire town of Southern Shores and anything in the commercial district. And that's how we have to treat it. We can't look at your individual situation as how we're going to go about discussing this. So I just want to remind the board members that we need to kind of stay in our lane.
Would we be speaking specifically to this property if it were a special use?
Once a site, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if it's established as a permitted use or special use, then at that point, yes, when a site plan is submitted, we would be considering it as a specific property.
For purposes of tonight,
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Anybody have questions for Mr. Varnell or Ms. Pledger? Robert?
The J1 students are primarily here in the summertime, I understand. What does the off-season business model look like for you?
At this time, what I would like to try and do is not just, label it as J1 housing, so to speak, but to any of it's workforce housing. So therefore, we all know that, if I can just use this as an example, like when the bridge workers come down and they're always working on the bridge, like they're working on the bridge now. And so it would be very easy to be able to house those people as well, because they could easily be combined in a shared living situation.
In a hotel or an inn, you're paying much steeper prices than what, of course, we're proposing. And again, that's would be the client's business model, but I also think that's why we built the word affordable into the definition that we're proposing.
And I've seen, some numbers here and that kind of thing. So you'd be planning, well, how many persons would be sharing a toilet?
You would have, in one room, a maximum of 12 people sharing.
12 sharing a toilet. What
Mhm.
about a sink?
Each one of the rooms will actually have 2 lavatories inside of it and 2 sinks inside of it. So the capability there is 30 people in a room, but I would not do that.
Once again, we're trying to keep this thing to a ZTA, not
Not site specific.
what would
and
happen
that's-
on
I-
an individual case. But, I mean, you're just answering his question, but I just want to try to keep it honed into a ZTA that is before us. Anybody?
Yeah, so looking at the definition, and this may be for Mr. Haskett or Mr. Varnell, and thank you, Ms. Pledger. So each shared space offered for rent within the structure, and there could be multiple shared spaces, right, under the definition?
That's referring to the room. So my
Okay.
vision when writing that was the space is the room.
Okay.
That's correct.
And so there could be 10 bunk units in each of those rooms
Correct.
and a maximum of 20 occupants per room.
So that way there's I mean, if you have an auditorium size room,
Yeah.
for example, you could put 80 people in that one room, but we wanted to try to somewhat limit it while doing what we feel is reasonable at the same time.
And still allowing the 50 square foot.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just wonder if that sentence is necessary unless there needs to be a maximum number of occupants. That's one thought. But there's nothing limiting time, length of occupancy. There's nothing limiting the density of the occupancy, number of units, number of shared spaces. So hypothetically, you could have a building in as many shared spaces as you could feasibly fit in there. But if it's subject to a special use permit, presumably you could limit it that way.
Right, that's true. And also, again, with that maximum, back to your previous point too, still, there's going to be a set number
Yes.
of people that can occupy it under this definition, even if it is a 400,000 square foot building. Still, each space, make it as big as you want, but you can only have up to 20.
Right. The last sentence where it says shared space occupancy dwelling does not include dormitory and residence halls, single-family dwellings and multifamily dwellings, motels, or vacation cottages. I assume, one, does not include dormitory and residence halls because those are prohibited. But are you also meaning to say that you could not use a single-family dwelling, a multifamily dwelling, a motel, or a vacation cottage as a shared space occupancy
Correct.
dwelling?
And I would say that it's because there's already, uses out there that are allowed in Southern Shore that accommodate those particular types of, call them commercial use. And originally, we had proposed an additional, as you may remember this, but an additional amendment to the code, which was to go in and in prohibited uses, which currently Southern Shores prohibited dormitory halls, residence halls. So I had proposed that we strike that as prohibited use. Now, the only reason I did that is in the event that somebody tried to liken this or make it akin to a dormitory residence. So how do we make that as clear as possible that that's not what we're allowing? We're only allowing what is specifically within this particular definition. Dormitories, for example, wouldn't have your kitchen accommodations. They wouldn't have the bathroom facilities we're proposing, things of that nature. However, Wes and I, in our conversation, he brought up a great point, which was do away with the prohibition. Don't strike the prohibition, but just exclude it from your definition. And that I thought was a great move, and that's what I decided to incorporate into our amendment.
Yeah, maybe I might split that sentence up and just say that SSO does not constitute a dormitory or residence hall. And then another sentence that single-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, motels, or vacation cottages may not be used as a shared space.
Just to make it more
occupancy.
clear is that, we would have no opposition to a change in language such as that, if that's what you recommend. Understanding that it's our ordinance, I do believe we've got the discretion to, if you make a recommendation, to agree to that change. So that would be a change we agree to, for sure.
I would think, when we get into your discussion about dormitory and residence hall, we do not currently have a definition of either in our ordinance, which I think probably deserves a definition, and differentiate that from what this ZTA speaks to. Because they are very much the same. I mean,
When you read it, yeah.
when I was at NC State 100 years ago, I lived in a residence hall that had some cooking. It was a residence hall, and it, in essence, could be a hall to house J1 students. So we need to differentiate between what your ZTA is asking for and what a residence hall and or dormitory would be defined as.
Wes, in my research, and I'm not the expert on zoning, such as my friend here, but zoning, or from a zoning perspective, dormitories and residence hall have to be linked to some form of educational use, correct? Such as it's an ancillary at that. In other words, it's a college dorm or something of that nature. My client's not operating, a college. She's not operating even a private school or something of that nature. That's not what's happening. So I don't know if that does it, but I do understand exactly what you're saying.
I couldn't find anything. I mean, even when you hit search on the Municode dormitory, you get nothing.
It's not in the town code, and I did, if you look up the definition, I think the Oxford Dictionary refers, or it does link it to institutional/educational uses.
I think we all went down the same rabbit hole then, because I Googled the Municode and couldn't find it either. And then,
Well, we want to get rid of ambiguity. So.
absolutely. Yes, sir.
Well, we received our packet from Wes, and I'm just curious because it was the same packet that was out there last June.
July.
What has changed in the narrative or your ZTA from last June?
No change in the ZTA. What's changed in the narrative is that we feel like we're getting much closer to the septic issue, which again, not to get site specific. However, the question is somewhat specific to my client, at least. We feel like we're getting closer to a resolution on that, where at first we were not sure. So we took that time off to work through those particular hurdles. Now the hurdle that we're at, though, is no different than what I brought up about HOA covenants. If, things like that, when lawyers, unfortunately, the only way we get paid is by, our time and our service. So to go and address an HOA issue before a use gets approved is going to cost my client money. So let's avoid that if we can, in the event you guys and the town council shoot this thing down. Same for septic. We wanted to know that there was some assurity there, but at the same time, we did not want to begin the administration of permitting and perhaps even going to the state level. We did not hiring engineers to design specific plans. We needed to get our bases, but not expend the money until such time as we knew that this was even a viable option for us. So that in all candor, is exactly what caused us to table this thing, but also bring back the exact same amendment. But note that it is still in there. We must have septic approval, of course, so that is
Well,
still a
and
condition.
once again, that's specific to your property and not to the
Correct.
ZTA.
I mean, in the definition, though, any particular property, of course, would have to have, I mean, the necessary septic for housing this amount of people is not the same as a house. Let's put it that way, as far as what's required. So I just wanted to point out, that would be incumbent upon any applicant in the future if this use is approved.
Got anything?
I don't have any questions for the applicant. I want some comments for the planning board and staff at the appropriate time.
Okay. Robert?
So, Wes or Casey or whoever, if the town wanted to restrict the number of persons sharing a toilet or a bathroom, if the town wanted to require accessibility for SSOs, those kinds of things, where would those be? Would we put those in the definition under the permitted uses thing? Where would we place those kinds of restrictions on any SSO that might be built within this town?
I would say that the definition itself, okay, if it was a permitted use, I'll kind of speak again for a second, but if it was a permitted use, as long as it met the requirements put forward, then it's approved administratively. Wes must do that. However, that sets a threshold when it comes to a special use. That at least is it's kind of a must have this to even get to the point where you can be considered for a special use, which then more conditions, if that's the favor of any board, could be placed on it, such as, I suppose, the conditions you're referring to. Wes, I don't know if you disagree or agree with that.
Yeah, my suggestion would be is if you think it should be a requirement, then it should be built in either to the definition or into the other requirements that they've proposed.
Does the health department come in and establish minimal facilities?
They're going to limit number of occupants by the septic capacity.
Well, if you could go beyond septic, right? You could purchase capacity from the wastewater plant down the road, right? Possibly.
It's a possibility.
If you had capacity.
Requires private agreement, of course,
Yeah.
negotiating with the wastewater on it, but yes.
As far as facilities on that site, wouldn't that be defined, controlled by the health department?
Typically.
Yeah, okay.
That takes some of the sting out of it, I suppose, if it's health department, health code rules.
How many people per bathroom?
Right. Well, I understand that. It's, I've looked into HUD requirements for persons that are use shared housing as part of a Section 8 voucher, I'm sorry. And there are restrictions as to how many people have to share a bathroom that are specified there, rather, and the square footage as well, per person, which is different than, our health department. In the health department, I was familiar with, I didn't realize that it's by occupants. I understood it was by bedrooms, by the number of occupants.
It's right, but it's bedrooms and recognizing occupants per bedroom.
At the health department, it's bedrooms, and Southern Shores is occupants. Right? I mean, in a nutshell.
Well, but they're going to recognize a maximum number of occupants per bedroom under the health department permit.
Or what is the definition of a bedroom too? Yeah.
Yep.
You're relying on what's on the plans. But to get back to you, Robert, I think I'm on the same page as you as far as the listing requirements that we would like to see in this situation. And right off the bat, I feel like that the definition is way too long. You could simply define what you're looking for, and then we start a requirement section.
Of course, I don't-
I would recommend shortening the definition because it is very, very long and has a lot of things in there. And then what we need to discuss as a board is what kind of requirements we would like to see on what you are proposing, your ZTA.
And on the
Because there's-
definition, of course, I don't know what you guys want, so we have to throw it all out there.
Sure. Well,
And get your
I mean-
opinion on it, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and that,
You know, the Department of Labor the Department of Agriculture for labor camps for persons that come in and are transient to work on our farms. The labor camps that individual farmers do, they have specific restrictions of how many people per bathroom,
Sure, yeah.
all of those kinds of things. It just seems like we can come up with something like that that is appropriate for the kind of facilities we'd like to see in the town.
and that would be listed out in the
Right.
requirements after we know what the definition is and narrow that definition down in scope and then do the requirements. I mean, if you look at what we did for produce stands, which is right around this in the commercial district, we defined what a produce stand was, and then we had like 8 or 10 conditions underneath it. This ZTA defines broad, specifically what you envision, but it has very little requirements below that definition. Only 3 that the A, B, and C speak to specifically, ratio of parking space to vehicle, bathroom facilities. It doesn't speak to the number of facilities per resident, like you were saying, Robert. And, the owner of the SSO shall obtain the requisite permits from the health department. The other 2, D and C, are pretty broad, but that would be something that would be in there, but it's not as critical to what we're trying to do as A, B, and C. And I'm saying that we need to hone down the definition of what an SSO would be and then put what requirements we would like to see or what concerns that we would like to see included in another draft of it or another stab at it, or the town is recommending that we go the special use route. So, I mean, I don't think anybody sitting up here, anybody in this room is opposed to your concept and what you're trying to do, Ms. Pledger, but it's for the entirety of Southern Shores, and we're sympathetic to what is needed in this county for affordable housing, and little chips at it are going to help out. So we're not against what you're trying to do, but we just want to have a few more protections, I think, for the town before I would vote on moving this thing forward tonight.
On the toilets and the showers, I'll let my client, she's written some numbers down here, but I don't know what they mean. So I'm gonna let her talk about that.
As I said, I do my research before I do anything. And so I guess I would want clarification to understand. I'm hearing you say what the town would want. So in saying that, are you saying that the town would want something differently than what the local governments like the health department and the state require? Because I did go to them ahead of time, and I'm like, okay, that's when we found out the square footage issue, because I was basing everything on 35 square foot per person, and they were saying no, that it had to increase to 50 square foot a person. So we went back and we made those adjustments. For the toiletries, it's still one to every 15 people. For the showers, it is 1 to every 8 people. So not to get ahead of the cart again, because like we were saying, this is not the site approval thing, but we're putting the building has already been drawn out it's going to house 12 showers. We still have all the toiletries that were there, double in each room. So we're well beneath what the requirement is, right on down to parking. So I call myself crossing, double dotting every I and triple crossing every T to make sure that we were doing what was required. Now, am I understanding you want to adjust that and make something different than that, or that you just want it written that we're not going to go over that, even if we went to a public septic? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think the issue for me is that we're creating a zoning text amendment that applies to everybody. It appears to me like you meeting all of this stuff we're talking about, but we as a body, we need to write in this code all of the details that we would like to see. And then you could come in and you could say, gee, Wes, here, I meet all of these. But we need to have it in our code. I think that this is how we would like shared space occupancy to be done in our town. And based on your application, I think you would meet all of those. The next person might or might not.
Understand.
If this were a special use and you came to us, I think everybody would look at it and go, wow, she meets she meets really reasonable requirements, and it would be up to the public hearing and that kind of thing as to whether or not you went forward. But if we're doing just an allowable use, then it behooves us and the town council to come up with, okay, what do we want in a shared housing facility? Because we're going to make this an allowed use. I think our homework on the front end is going to be a lot longer, perhaps, than if it were a special use. Then, there's a little bit more of site-specific conversation to have.
Understood.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Can I actually, that's why I was taking notes. I didn't sit down to ignore you. I was taking notes over there about what you guys have been saying, but something dawned on me. So just to make sure we're all clear here, is it that you would rather see a ton of conditions in a permissible use, or would you rather see, okay, some flaky conditions, but then make it a special use? You can get to where you're going under either. Now, what I would say though is, I don't think there's any need to put 15 conditions on this thing and then make it a special use either. If you're already dictating conditions and extensive conditions, then we should keep it at the administrative level. Now, that would just be my position. Now, Wes's advice though is based on what's in front of him, not based on something. I don't know what his advice would be if it had 15 conditions written in there, but I'm just trying to get a sense of where you guys are coming from.
I don't think it would be 15 conditions, but
Oh, no, I'll hype
I've written down 6 or 7
Okay.
concerns that I can't necessarily say I agree with or in your ZTA for our town. And I'll be glad to start the ball rolling. I mean, Robert's, made his issues with it, and getting ahead of myself, but I had looked at Chippewa Falls regulations on shared housing, and it's in our packet, and it's a little bit over the top, but they ask a lot of conditions like, what one flush water closet, lavatory for each 7 persons was in there. This is their zoning ordinance. They asked for any communal cooking. Someone responsible for the food service facility should be on site. Once again, I don't know if that would apply to you, or your ZTA, but the size of the shared space within the structure would be something that I would like to see spelled out. What are the year-round possibilities if the J1 students move out? I mean, you're a businesswoman, or anybody's going to be a business person. What do they do with those empty rooms? Well, I would want to rent them if I was in your shoes or in a business person's shoes, but that's not addressed. In your narrative, you speak to the tourist season. What is that? When does that start and stop? The commercial code requirements would probably be a state level, sprinklers, smoke detectors, so on. Maximum number of inhabitants per structure, square footage. I mean, how many people do we want? Can it be 2 stories? I mean, this is not about your property. It's about, what happens in our town here. So,
I'm
Michael?
just,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No.
Have you finished? I
yeah,
apologize.
I looked over at
Oh,
Michael.
I apologize.
If you want to go, you were starting to speak.
I just wanted to say that so much of the work that you've done and this request is really very site-specific and with your facility. And so that lends me to think of a special use permit as opposed to.
Michael?
Yeah, I was just going to say, one, I think regardless of whether or not there's a long or a short list of stipulations, I think it should be a conditional use permit, but, a special use permit. I don't disagree with Mr. Varnell that perhaps that list can be shorter and less precise if it's a special use permit. I don't think you generally have to include stipulations in your ordinance that are requirements anyway. So we shouldn't worry about, you have to comply with the building code. They have to comply with the building code regardless. You could, for instance, revise the definition to say means a private structure in which shared spaces are offered for rent for the purposes of providing affordable sleeping, accommodations payable in money, and other consideration to persons who do not meet the definition of family. And then jump to SSO does not, however I said it earlier.
Fragment those 2 sentences.
Yeah, well, and then take that second piece of the fragment and everything in between there and put them as stipulations, A, B, C, D.
As opposed to breaking it out in the other chapter.
Yeah, and, well, so you would have under special use permit, each shared space offered for rent within the structure may accommodate up to 10 bunk units. Those would be your subpart stipulations. On the bathroom concern, I think you could just simply amend that to say something to the effect of bathroom facilities shall be provided which accommodate separate use by males and females, and say that applications for special use permits shall demonstrate sufficient bathroom, lavatory facilities, bathing facilities, what have you, to ensure proper sanitary conditions. And then they just have to demonstrate compliance when they apply for their special use permit.
And maybe site, it's got to be specific. We just can't say appropriate because that is ambiguous, I would think. I would say that there would have to be a number of persons per toilet. Chippewa Falls has the number of square footage per person in the shared space. And I think we're getting on the right trail.
Well, it only has to be specific if it's not subject to a special use permit. But if it's subject to a special use permit, this board and the town council can use their discretion because that's the purpose.
Yeah.
So if they came back and said, well, we're going to provide one lavatory for 30 people, I think we could all say that's probably not going to cut it.
Right.
And, I would say this, Ms. Pledger is the only one that we know of that's teeing something up. And it seems like she's under a time limit too. And I think there's a lot of credit we should give her to pushing something like this forward. I don't know that we should take maybe months longer to do this, where we could maybe come back to improve it after the fact.
Well, Wes, what, on the town staff recommendation for special use, what do you see the timeline from tonight moving forward for their ZTA that would be a special use permit?
Well, one, I would ask, do you agree to that change? And if not, then we'll go to the next question.
Well, and Wes, correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say I don't agree to it. They could recommend disapproval,
That's correct.
and then we take that to the
That's correct.
to the council with a recommendation of disapproval. If that occurred, I'd only ask that it be cited why it was being disapproved. In other words, if they're agreeing with your recommendation that this be special use and we didn't agree to that. So I need to ask my client about the special use thing, if you don't mind, but can I hear your second question?
Yeah, well, the second question would be, if you do agree to it, are you also agreeable to some of the suggestions and questions about some other conditions, or at least the bare minimum, instead of the longer list if it were a permitted use, but at least some of the things like lavatories?
There's no doubt, what we want to do here is try to get this thing in front of council as soon as possible. I mean, Mr. Sanders touched on it a little bit. We are under time constraint. Time is money. And this isn't about making money, but at the end of the day, it's a business decision for us. So I like Mr. Sanders' line of thinking that, us agreeing to wait 4 or 5 months for the planning board to put together their own definition with conditions and things of that nature, certainly I think would be a more exhaustive process than just going straight through to the council. But would we be willing to make modifications based on these recommendations? As long as, Wes, as you tell me that we can still present it to council based on our agreed to modifications on a usual schedule, then we'd be amenable to that. How would that affect our time, is what I'm asking.
Well, I would say that the planning board, if there's going to be a recommendation as to what they want to see in it, it should be made tonight.
Tonight, okay. And that makes it easy then.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing, that there seems to be more concern about bathroom, and I didn't quite understand Mr. Lawler's question earlier, but bathrooms are certainly something I'm hearing from most of the members that they're concerned about. The size of the rooms, and Mr. Zenner, he made there's no need to put a condition in there for something like building code. They're going to have to meet the building code. I get that, but I think I'm hearing more concern about bathrooms and the actual space than anything else. So I don't know if that's what y'all want to focus on.
Well, and like the maximum number of inhabitants per structure square foot, you've got to come up with some size of the shared space. I don't know if the state has something in their regulations that specifically, speak to that, but
They certainly do for toilets and showers, which is what my client was talking about earlier. So they certainly do the one for every 15 toilets, one for every 8 occupants as far as showers. I mean, that's state code. I mean, if that's not what you like, then okay.
if this
But I
was-
do think a special use would, again, take care of these particular issues. You're not setting precedents with special use permits. It's just a matter of fact, they're designed by law to be site specific. A property right next to it that's got the ability to do something just a little bit different because of the size of it. And you can allow that, and you can approve that, and you cannot place the same condition. So again, in terms of efficiency, what I would say is that I do not mind asking my client right now if we can come up with something tonight to push forward with the recommendation, then I'd be happy to ask her and explain to her what that means. Absolutely. The reason that is the case is because if we're going to amend what I presented to you guys, and then send that amendment, I've got to approve it. That's just the way it works. I'm not trying to be head honcho here. The other thing is I could take y'all's recommendation of denial. Prefer not to do that though. So that again, if there's something tonight we could do to come up with something that you guys would be willing to push through, I will explain to her what that means. Y'all just need to tell us what that is. If not, then we would ask that recommendation be denial, and we'll push through to council as such.
Well, we
Can
want to make it as time sensitive as possible, but at the same time, wheels of government move slow. I mean, we know that.
Wow.
So, I mean, we want to help you any way we can within reason and protect our town.
Understand. And can I just say that I think Pleasure Palace has shown that we, when we develop the educational facility that we currently have, our standards compared to everybody else's standards as far as the childcare facilities on this Outer Banks are here, and everybody else's is here. I mean, I'm on a power unit all by myself because that was something that the town required. That was a lot. You know, currently, I could actually, I don't know if you're aware of the layout, but I mean, we already have 17 toilets in that building. What facility on this beach has 17 toilets in it currently? So realistically, even if we dropped it and went with your 8, that's 138 people. We're not even asking anywhere near that. But I do understand what you're saying as far as you have to do what you need to do as far as the town. What I am asking is that the town does not crutch me for something that they're trying to create. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does, and it would lend itself to the town staff's recommendation that it be a special use for you. And
But
I'm
if-
inclined to go with staff recommendation, and hopefully in a timely manner, it can get resolved. John, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a number of things on my ready.
John, have you got some questions? Or,
Yes.
As I've always done, I feel that I want to be a team player. I don't have any negative reports from any of our inspectors or anything like that because they know all they have to do is tell me and it gets done. Of course, they didn't have a lot to tell me because I already did it. But it's one of those things that I do want to be continue to be a town player with the community, but I want the community to be working with me as well because I've done just that. I've done way above and beyond what was required of me. But I did it because, I believe in quality, not quantity. And so I don't want those two to get confused when we're making all these decisions. It's not about throwing a bunch of people in here. We already have numbers and limits. We just want to be treated fairly. And I can't say that I want to be given the same opportunity that everyone else out here has because I don't even like it myself. I am trying to be better than what we already have. So with that being said, I'm going to say, my counsel, what do you suggest?
In talking with McCline, because she's always willing to go above and beyond, we would agree to the special use recommendation. Of course, I don't know what you guys are about to say next, but in my opinion, staff's recommendation is simply to move this thing forward with the requirement that it not be a permitted use, meaning it's approved administratively if we check all the boxes, but that it comes back through you guys and through council when a site-specific plan is presented. I have no doubt that my client can satisfy the reasonability of this board and the council on those issues, so we're not afraid of a special use. If that, again, is your recommendation, we would accept that.
Okay.
Which means that that's how it would go to council.
John?
Yeah, I'm the ETJ representative for Martins Point. And I was appointed to that position by the Dare County Commissioners, who have made workforce housing top priority. And I agree with that. And I've worked on a number of ordinances during my time on the county planning board oriented towards workforce housing. I don't know, absent this application, I don't know what the interest of the town is, whether they want to pursue something like this. If they do, then whether this is a special use or a permitted use, I really think it'll need to go back to staff to draft a proper ordinance. There are so many issues here that I don't think we're going to be able to address adequately tonight. Now, I want to address a couple of things that you've said. The Martins Point commercial area has 10 lots. And you and your client have been aware for 10 months that there's a covenant issue. The protective covenants do not have this listed as a permitted use. And the covenants also specifically exclude a 100% residential use. It only takes 50% of the property owners to make a change. That means with 4 or 5 people going along, you could change the covenants. So to me, you're saying you don't want to put one thing ahead of the other because you're trying to save your client money. That'd be the first domino that I would have gone after.
So what though? If we can't get approval, then we can't make our use.
Yeah.
But this is not site specific.
I'm not talking about a specific site. I'm talking about.
This could be outside of Martins
I am
Point.
talking about 10 commercial lots.
Okay, I don't
But
understand.
I'm just
the
saying,
question.
I
Understood.
would go, that'd be the first domino that I would go after.
Mhm.
And once
Duly
again,
noted.
that covenants, especially Martins Point covenants, are not in our purview for
Correct.
any ZTA decision or special use.
In any
decision.
town decision ever
Yeah.
in the history of town decisions.
You tried to put us in a position where we have a choice of a permitted use with a lot of conditions or a special use with very few conditions. I like special uses with a lot of conditions, because then it's very clear to everyone what you're dealing with. That way people can make decisions based on something that's in writing. So I like that approach. I've heard you and your client mention this at one point as being an educational facility, and then I hear it as workforce housing. And I've also heard where people like bridge workers could come and use this facility. Well, I assume that if these other people are using this facility, they probably have cars. So I don't think the one parking space per 7 people is applicable.
But those people wouldn't be able to make the use then. That's why we put it in there, for that exact reason.
Well, I think if this were to go forward, what I would ask staff to do is to research similar uses in this state and find out what type of parking standards they have. I do not think the client's attorney should be drafting our parking standards. In your application, you indicated that the hope was to have housing for as many as 96 students. Doesn't mean it has to be in this facility. It could be somewhere in Southern Shores, but you've used that number, 96. So I assume if someone could come up with a location where you could do septic or a package system or tie into an existing system, that is an option. Again, you submitted it last year, you submitted it again recently.
Okay.
That's fine in certain locations, but that's the equivalent of like a 48-bedroom house. All right? Now, I think that works in some places, it doesn't work in others. I don't think something like that belongs next to someone's residence. You know, I mean, you're talking about 96 young people, many of them from foreign countries, here at the beach. What could go wrong, you know? So I think if the town is interested in workforce housing, this needs to be tailored in a certain way so that these structures that have this many people are in certain locations. It also appears to me, and Wes, please interrupt me if I say anything that's inaccurate. It appears under this draft ordinance that we're looking at that space could be rented on a short-term basis for a week or even a day. It appears that space could be advertised on Airbnb.
Do you want me to respond to that, or
If you-
I would say
Yes, you, Wes, please do.
it's probably more appropriate for him to answer it, but I would say by him including that it does not include vacation cottage. Vacation cottage is short-term rental. So is that what you're implying?
Correct,
That it would not be for short-term rental use?
correct.
Well, if it's not for short-term rental use, then something needs to be put actually in the ordinance that says, say minimum rental is 30 days or 90 days or a year, whatever.
Which could also be added to site-specific plan.
Well, I don't want, again, instead of getting into the site-specific stuff where people come together and argue everything, I like to have stuff in an ordinance. I want people to see what they're looking at. Okay?
Understood.
You know, we have a residential property owner in Martins Point. Their side property line borders 7 commercial lots.
Is Martins Point in Southern Shores?
No,
Okay.
but Southern Shores has jurisdiction over the 10 commercial properties there.
But not the residential. I just want to make sure I'm
That
I'm
is-
not
That is
familiar.
correct. That's
Okay.
under Dare County.
understood.
So you have the potential of 7 properties that could have, you know, a large number of residents. I know in Southern Shores, I remember when all the signs went up, the no mini hotels. This has the potential of a structure housing, I'll call them transient people, or they're not full-time residents, has the capacity to house residents that are 4 times more people than got people bent out of shape in this town when an oceanfront house went up. So if this goes forward, I would like to send it back to staff to take into consideration some of the things we've mentioned, to draft a potential ordinance. I would also like to see this fashioned in a way similar to what we did when we dealt with drive-through facilities. You know, I don't know how many, if any of you were on the board, but we discussed drive-through facilities, and the planning board kind of came to the conclusion that they didn't belong in certain areas. They shouldn't be in the Martins Point commercial area. They shouldn't be on Juniper Trail. So we fashioned an ordinance to make sure that they were properly located, such as Southern Shores Crossing or the Food Lion Shopping Center. But given the potential of, you know, equivalent of a 48-bedroom house, I want to see something that protects the Martins Point property owners. I want to see something that protects the residents of Southern Shores from having something like this right next to them, or even a row of them. So
Wes, are there in the in the general commercial district, there's height limitations, right? And
Correct.
there's lot coverage limitations,
Correct.
setback limitations.
Yes, sir.
But
And there's a maximum already, which I've talked to my client, she'd be willing to reduce this number that's in there, if that's something you guys want. The 10 bunks, which is 20 per, she's open.
well,
to
once
that.
again, we, as a ZTA for the town, for Ms. Pledger, but for the.
Well, no,
town-
as an applicant, I was just saying that's what's in front of you.
Sure.
And that's what you're deciding on
Well,
tonight.
I mean, and you're hearing our concerns about
Mhm.
how the town is protected moving forward in a ZTA of this nature. But as far as moving forward and going on to the next order of business, I think we've talked about this enough. Do you have any questions of us before we vote on why?
Wes, I'm going to look to you to this. Normally I look to the attorney. I don't want to speak as the town's attorney. Do we have the right to request that this not be tabled and that it be rejected?
You could move forward to the town council public hearing with a recommendation of denial.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Well, we would deny approval and recommend special use.
You could flat out recommend denial. If they have agreed to incorporate the special use permit requirement. So if that's what you all are still inclined to do, you could do that. But also if there are additional concerns that haven't been addressed, then it may be best to recommend denial if you think that it should be the special use and additional conditions or requirements.
And I'm not bootstrapping anybody, guys. I mean, look, I'm aware, I represent 2 towns. I've been on both sides of this thing a lot. I know what denials, recommendations of denials look like sometimes in front of town council. But the way I look at it is this: we get a recommendation of denial, we move forward to the town council with what we got here, we take our chances. If we get denied there, we're not a stop from bringing something back to you guys, as long as it's different than what we're currently presenting, and you guys loud and clear have told us how you guys feel about that. So I do believe at least we stand a chance for approval at that point, as opposed to never getting to the table. And if we don't succeed, then we go from there. And at that point, heck, it may be in Dare County, right? In their jurisdiction. So,
And I would just also comment in Mr. Finelli's concerns, understandable. But I would say that it's not town staff's place to put in language in their application and their proposed language. I think the onus is on the applicant.
Right.
For them to address your concerns, not staff.
I think it's up to staff to draft an ordinance.
For the applicant.
Not if they're not directed by council.
Yes, in order for the town staff to move forward, it either has to be a recommendation from the planning board or from the town council. In this case, the applicant paid for and submitted his application.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
sorry, guys, and that's why when you had made mention that you felt like I was giving you choices. That's why, because ultimately we could agree to a lot of stuff, but we could also just nod and then
So
deal with the denial.
Wes, what do you perceive as our 2 choices here?
Right now, it sounds like to me that you all could recommend approval with it being a special use permit or a special use, or recommend denial.
If we recommend denial, it goes, if they want to pursue it, to town council
Correct.
As submitted.
As submitted.
as submitted.
And it would be public hearing most likely at the June 6th meeting, I think. Or if you all wanted to discuss potential conditions or other requirements to add in addition to a special use permit, you all could do that as well.
So that's 3 choices.
Yes, 3 choices.
What was that last one?
Or special use permit, recommendation of approval of special use permit in addition to additional requirements.
But citing those additional requirements. Yeah.
And spelling them out in
Right.
the language,
Right.
such as parking, bathrooms, et cetera.
When is the council meeting?
June 6th, I believe.
So this would be heard if we rejected it, it could be on the June 3rd agenda.
Either way, it could go to the June, I think, 6th, first Tuesday of the month.
Is it 6? Because it has to be presented at one hearing.
June 6th.
And then set for hearing at the next, so.
Yeah, the way the public notices have to be submitted, there is a possibility that we could have it on the June 6th town council agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval with changes. I'd recommend that the proposed definition be amended to strike. It would be after the first sentence, to strike that all the way to SSO does not include dormitory. And to recommend that definition be changed to that last sentence there be changed to SSO is not considered to constitute a dormitory or residence hall, period. And then to strike that last sentence, single-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, motels, or vacation cottages. And then everything in the middle there. So each shared space offered for rent, residents of the SSO, the owner of the SSO, and single-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, or vacation cottages shall not be able to be used as a SSO. That those become part of what is, I believe, C, special use permit. Whatever that number is supposed to be, and then A, B, C, D, E, and then F, G. I'll add all of those things if you're following what I'm saying.
Moving a little fast, and it's a lengthy motion,
Yep.
Michael.
Well, I want to get it all in there.
Okay.
So then you would do that, and then you would change B to say that bathroom facilities shall be provided which accommodate separate use by males and females, period. And that special use permit shall demonstrate sufficient lavatory and bathroom shower facilities to ensure sanitary conditions. I would add one of those provisions that said that the number of occupants shall be limited to 100 square feet. So each occupant shall be afforded with 100 square feet in the building, and that limits the occupant number. That may not be consistent with what Myth Pledger, but I think you all want a number, and I think that's an appropriate number. That would be my motion. Happy to take any amendments.
And that it be a special use.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a second for Michael's motion? Second? Anybody? Going once, going twice? No second shown, motion denied. I would make a motion, and it's basically what staff recommends. I recommend disapproval of the application to the town council unless the proposed use is proposed as a special use with as many conditions as the planning board deems reasonable for moving this forward. That's my motion.
Second.
Second from Mr. Lawler. Discussion.
So are you saying as part of the motion, we are now supposed to go through our list and come up with a final list?
Not at this point, but for the special use.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. You're trying to come,
He motioned to deny.
Yes.
So
I'll read it again.
conditions wouldn't matter.
Okay. My motion is, and with a second from Ed, to recommend disapproval of the application as it appears to us tonight to town council unless the proposed use is proposed as a special use. And when it gets at the special use, or to fill in the special use with recommendations as the planning board sees reasonable.
I'm not sure that's what staff was recommending there. I think what
I'm
they,
reading it straight out of staff recommendation.
Mr. Haskett, you can clarify.
We are recommending denial of it unless it goes forward as a special use.
And we
If
agree.
they- if they have agreed to special use, then you all would be recommending approval as a special use.
So the terminology or the additional conditions with the special use would come at a later date, right? We're not doing that tonight.
No, we're not doing that tonight.
Yep. So
Right.
if it is approved as a special, if the text amendment is approved and then someone applies for a special use permit, then the conditions, reasonable and appropriate conditions and safeguards can be considered with the application.
So if we straight up disapprove, then it goes to town council.
You could recommend disapproval as is, or recommend approval if it's a special use.
So our motion means that a special use would be granted right now.
No, this would be recommending approval of the ZTA to council, and the council,
Well, we're not, I did not intend to recommend approval of this ETA.
all right, then I would suggest that if your motion is to deny the recommendation of denial to the town council.
I'll withdraw my motion.
So just a recommendation of denial, just so I'm clear? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's
I
the
would withdraw my recommendation, and I would motion to disapprove or recommend disapproval of the ZTA as presented.
Do we have a second?
Is there a second of that?
I'll second that.
Discussion.
So this is just the denial. It will go to council.
Right.
Nothing about special, nothing about anything else.
I have a little bit of discussion. I think, and I second it, so I'm in favor of that. I think this gives the applicant an opportunity to come forward in the future with another list of conditions that might be more to our liking.
Couldn't
So
agree
the
more.
door is always open. But based on what we have here tonight, I'll stand by my second.
Thank you, John. Anyone else before we vote? Michael? Okay, motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Michael
Forward.
opposed, 3.
Deny. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you, guys, very, very much for indulging us. Do appreciate it.
Well, I concur with John. The door's always open and we want to work with you any way we can, but we're not ready to do it just yet.
Understood, absolutely. And if council disagrees, like you said, we got a door. We got a door. Thank y'all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that was easy.
But, well, can we recommend that the town staff prepare an language that would be appropriate to allow shared occupancy as a special use in the commercial district?
Question to Wes.
That's what we have to do if we want to allow it, right?
I'll second that motion.
I want to see your motion.
Sure.
Poor Sheila, she's up there.
It's recorded, as stated. I'd like to make a motion.
What are we still talking about this, or is it appropriate to keep going with this, or do we want to proceed on? Maybe you got a question for Wes.
I understood that the only way that the staff could work on the town's behalf would be from a recommendation of the town planning board or from the town council. And in that regard, I would like for the town staff to prepare an ordinance that would be to allow for a special use of shared occupancy in the commercial district.
Does this go with the recommendation of denial for that application?
No, we know that this is gonna come back. We might as well be ready for it.
That's my
Well,
point. That's
what
my
Wes
point.
is, they're the ones that put the ZTA forward, not the town.
That's right.
So the onus is on them to bring back a ZTA that will be palatable to the town, whether they run through us or they run through town council, right?
And I don't mind helping Mr.
Sure,
Barnell
yeah, I mean,
or
we're
giving
not
him my
trying to-
thoughts. but he-
I'm not talking about Casey Varnell. I'm
Yeah.
talking, or his client. I'm talking about the town of Southern Shores. If we want an ordinance, if we want to allow shared occupancy as a special use, then we should write our own ordinance to have in there what we expect, so that when people come to us, they have at least met some of these requirements.
Understood. Yes, sir.
That's what I'm suggesting that we do, is that we prepare before people show up and make these requests.
You all can make that request of staff.
Any thoughts on
Was
that?
that a motion?
No, well,
Well,
kind of, but we're going to hone into
I think it's very similar to the point that John was making, is that if this is a use that we want allowed, let's go ahead and set our parameters forward and have our position known, as opposed to having attorneys come in and say, how about this? How about this? Will you
Yeah,
take that?
sure.
And we just adopt it in our code. I understand the process of having it.
Well, if this turns into a motion, I'm going to vote against it for the simple reason that we have members of council here. I think it's up to them to provide direction. I've never been comfortable with the planning board having its own agenda. I sort of feel like we should deal with what's placed before us and not put us against the council. They're aware of what's going on, and I would wait for direction from them.
I respect that.
I was-
I don't have a problem with that either.
I was
Yeah, no,
interpreting it as a recommendation to council.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Let's do it
by
that way.
maybe saying unanimous consent from the planning board that we would recommend what Robert has just spoken to. Would that work for you?
Oh, absolutely. I do not want to direct staff.
Yeah.
I do not mean that.
Well, I mean, in some cases,
not really
it's
our
our right as a planning board. We can do that. I mean, it is our right, but there's three members of town council here tonight, and they understand
Okay.
what this is. So I would say that as a planning board, we are unanimous in recommending that town council pursue a zoning text amendment that encapsulates what we've just gone through tonight.
Yes, sir.
Are we okay?
I would vote if the word was consider.
Consider.
But again, when you say pursue, you're directing
consider.
council, and I
Okay. Consider.
like that word.
Everybody good?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, let's move on.
Very good.
All right. Can I modify the agenda?
Yes, sir. You may.
I would love to have these people sitting here getting a civics lesson. Hopefully yours is going to run a little smoother, but I wouldn't count on it. Is that,
Well,
I mean, what do I need to do? I'm going to make an executive decision because I'm the chairman and I've had a broken leg, and so.
procedurally, it should have occurred at the approval of agenda, but if you're saying that's how it's going.
Can
then
I
that's how
make
it's
a
going.
motion?
I don't think you have to. You can just,
Well, we're going to do it. And if the powers that be don't like it.
you can ask if anyone objects.
Does anyone object? There you go. Anybody on,
That would be moving the old business item B behind new business A.
yeah, that's exactly what we're gonna do. Okay. So, Wes, can you briefly get us through, I don't know if we need to read all this or not.
No, sir. Next item on the agenda is ETA-2303. At the April 17, 2023 Planning Board meeting, the board considered ZTA 2303 that was drafted on March 31st, 23. What you have in your packets was drafted March 28, 23. Or excuse me, April 28, 23. And that amendment was to amend the town's minimum lot width requirements in all of the residential zoning districts so that the requirements are unambiguous as directed by the town council at their March 21st meeting. And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I'm following the regular agenda.
It's all right, back up.
My apologies. Next item is ETA-2304. This is an amendment, town ZTA from Mr. Matt Huband. Town zoning map application or zoning map amendment application was submitted by a resident, the applicant, in Southern Shores Landing to rezone the western portion of Southern Shores Landing from C General Commercial to Planned Unit Development, or PUD, in 2005. The town's official zoning map, 2007, shows approximately 2/3 of Southern Shores Landing is zoned RS10 residential, and the remaining 1/3 is zoned C General Commercial. In reviewing the rezoning application, town staff investigated the history of the retained 1/3 commercial zoning district and determined there was no official town amendment of the zoning map to RS10 following Southern Shores Landing approval. The proper zoning of Southern Shores Landing is actually based on a 2005 zoning map amendment wherein the entire development is zoned C General Commercial. It is important to note that the town and town staff have been operating as if Southern Shores Landing was zoned residential pursuant to the town zoning map. Upon discovering this error, town staff advised the applicant to withdraw his application, and the town would proceed with the zoning map amendment application to rezone Southern Shores Landing in its entirety to RS10 residential to reflect its current use and its designation on the zoning map.
Can I stop you there?
Yes, sir.
Let's skip over that next paragraph and just go, I think it summarizes it, the next page, starting with April 11th.
Yes, sir.
And then we'll go down to the conclusion. I'll get you to read the conclusion for us.
April 11, 2023, the applicant submitted a public records request for the withdrawn ZTA-2302. On April 12, 2023, the applicant submitted the documents received, ZTA-2302, as a proposed text amendment, which is now identified as ZTA-2304 and on the agenda. The ZTA is consistent with the town's existing and future land use map and the town's currently adopted land use plan. The town's land use plan contains policy 2, action item 2B, policy 7, action item 7B, policy 26, and action item 26B that are applicable to this application. Staff's conclusion is that the proposed amendments are not inconsistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan. However, town staff believes that the concerns regarding setback, stormwater, and buffer requirements can be more specifically addressed through conditions and special use permits when a special use such as restaurants, drive-through facilities or establishments, small mixed-use group developments, etc., is proposed. Whenever a special use is proposed, the application is first considered by the planning board and subsequently considered by the town council following a public hearing. Town Code Section 36-207C establishes that special uses are subject to the requirements of the C General Commercial District. They also are subject to appropriate conditions and modifications relating to impacts on adjacent properties, transportation and transportation systems, transportation interconnectivity, stormwater, utilities and telecommunication facilities, including capacity, vegetation and other elements of the natural environment, noise, hours of operation, and other factors that the town council finds applicable, and additional regulations and requirements imposed by the town council as provided in Article 10 of the zoning ordinance. Such conditions can be recommended by the planning board, which become effective if approved by the town council. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Wes. It's a long convoluted path that we've taken with the zoning map and the intent of what the town staff, the opinion of the town staff was that the intent was to have Southern Shores Landing zoned residential all along. We all know that. I think that applicant needs to come forward now and tell us what we want to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like I live here now almost. Again, my name's Matt Huban. I'm a resident of Southern Shores Landing, and I come before you tonight again to try to, as you said, our community has been, for the purposes of the town, the land use plan, the zoning map, Dare County zoning records, saying that their community is zoned residential, which would afford us the 50-foot setback to any type of commercial property or mixed-use development that abuts their community, which again is why we're here. I understand, Wes, and we've talked extensively over the last few months as far as what the town can do with the special use permit. However, in addition to that, and as much as we would like to think that all those conditions could be met to protect their community, with the ZTA, we kind of felt like this was also another layer of protection for us to be able to protect our community from the future development of that commercial property. This ZTA that was actually approved by you all, that was drafted by the town, that was already approved to go to the town council meeting, was pulled by the town attorney, from what I understand, under the auspices of him being able to, or use a special use permit to be able to do that. Why that was done, we weren't really given a clear understanding of why that was done other than that particular explanation, which is why I wanted to resubmit this ZTA to go back to the town council to have them vote on this, again, as an additional protection for our community to ensure that we do get the 50-foot setback with the 20-foot vegetative buffer that is due to all residential communities, not only just ours, but everywhere else in the town. And I would like to, again, hope that you all would make that recommendation in addition to going along with staff's recommendation of being able to protect us from that development with those special use permits. We have been living with this situation for the last 3 or 4 months, never knowing when the site plan is going to get done, what's going to be done, what are they going to do? Are we going to have a driveway 3 feet from our back door or 5 feet from our back door? This way, at least we know if this is done, it's an additional layer of protection for us and everybody else in Southern Shores. So we would ask for you to approve this and send this to the town council for their vote. Thank you.
Stay up there.
I'm here.
Thank you. And I think anybody that knows the situation empathizes with where you're at in Southern Shores Landing. You would rather have the ZTA as written than a special use on a case-by-case basis.
I was
I'm
under, no, I would rather have both.
Well,
I mean, I didn't know there was an option to just have one or the other.
well,
The thing is with us is if I say, yes, we'd like to have the ZTA and next week Saga comes, files their site plan before the town council votes, we're out. They can't go, we can't do anything.
Mhm.
So if that is our only option of having the planning board and the town do special use, as a special use commit to impose all those conditions, or we have this and have to take our chances, obviously I'm going to go with, the staff. because that assures us that if the site plan's filed, at least we know we have a fighting chance.
Wes, is the, in the conclusion, you're saying more specifically that these issues that are brought forth in the ZTA that you were proposing, those issues may be better served as a special use permit, but that would be on a case-by-case application, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir. Whether it be for a restaurant or drive-through facility or planned unit development or
Dumpster.
mixed-use group development, commercial facilities that abut residential zoning districts. It's the special use permit would be able to address it. And yes, it would be case-by-case basis as the applications come in.
And you prefer the ZTA as written if we approve that tonight, just to move it towards town council for a vote?
Not if that's my only option.
Yeah, well,
If you're saying that,
I don't think it is, but I don't think it's one or the other. The town council is going to have to ultimately decide whatever we.
correct, I was under the impression that staff was directed to, work with the developer to give us the maximum amount of setback possible, but there's no guarantee for that. However, I was also under the impression that I could file the ZTA, have the planning board make a recommendation, go to the town council for approval. And during that process, if the developer then submitted their site plan, that we still had, the town was still going to do what they were going to do as far as the.
Yeah, so.
Is that possible, Wes, if there's a site plan?
Because this is not, again, just for our community, it's for the entire.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
community
I'm
of
just
Southern
saying,
Shores.
I'll try to clarify. So we have you all have a ZTA in front of you all tonight that puts these requirements into place. And I don't think it's a matter of which option does Southern Shores Landing have if we're talking about Southern Shores Landing, although we can't treat it as that because this applies to the entire commercial. All these situations is not just Southern Shores Landing and the potential mixed-use group development next door. So let's say hypothetically, the planning board recommends approval of this language. And in the meantime, a site plan or a special use permit application rather is submitted by an adjoining property to any of these situations, then the requirements that were in effect when they submitted their application would apply and not this ZTA if it's done prior to adoption. In other words, what I'm saying is if a site plan or a special use permit application is submitted prior to adoption of this ZTA, then what you are then relying on is the special use permit.
Correct.
He is saying that by submitting this application, by submitting this proposed language, it gives him another.
If they don't apply for anything before the June 6th
Layer
meeting,
of
the town
protection.
council approves it, then it's a moot point. Because this now, the ZTA becomes in effect. Is that my understanding?
Yeah,
Correct.
he's submitting this as another quote unquote layer of protection. But
And this is why it was so important for us to get this done 2 months ago when it was pulled days before, because we're still sitting here, there's no site plan. We could be 6 months from now, and there'll still be no site plan.
We've never had a poke at this.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, this is our first.
Yeah, you have not, you all considered the zoning map amendment that was
Sure.
withdrawn.
Yes, you consider the
But
zoning map
They have
amendment,
not
not,
considered the zoning text
The
amendment.
zoning
That's
text
before you now.
That's right.
Correct.
We approved the zoning map amendment. That got
Correct.
pulled.
yeah.
And then-
And again, the ZTA goes back to giving us what's afforded the residential
So-
community. We're not asking for anything different, just that additional layer is there.
By passing this ZTA or approving this ZTA to move forward to town council tonight, we would be offering a portion of protection that would help them in their situation
It
or
wouldn't
in their
just,
ZTA.
it wouldn't just be for planned unit developments. It would apply to planned unit
Yes.
developments next to restaurants,
Mhm.
drive-through facilities. That entire list. It's not just their It's not just Southern Shores Landing.
Right.
But yes, sir, if it's adopted, however, it's not, it will no longer offer protection if wherever it applies, if a site plan or special use permit application is submitted prior to council adopting this language.
Correct.
In that event, the applicant has permanent choice and they could go with whatever requirements were in effect at the time of their application. And that is true up until the day of adoption.
And that would still fall under the special use guidelines and
And then
permits
at
that you would,
that point, that application.
that staff would recommend.
We would be, yes, sir, we would look into reasonable and appropriate conditions and safeguards to address the items of concern.
Right. I mean, obviously, we're dealing with a situation that nobody's ever had to address before. And, it's a situation that's been, probably would have gone 20 years from now that nobody would have had to address until the situation, presented itself. We're just trying to, bring something in a right that was wrong many, many, many years ago through no fault of anybody else's.
Sure. Anybody have questions for Matt?
I have a question. Who wrote the ZTA?
It was written by town staff and the town attorney.
Okay, so the statement of consistency, that was written by the town staff
Town attorney and town staff.
and town staff.
It is not inconsistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan.
Okay. The last sentence of the statement of consistency, the town considers the adoption of this ordinance amendment to be reasonable and in the public interest. I move that we recommend adoption of this ordinance.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
Yeah, can I ask a clarification? So I want to be clear. Staff's recommendation is that this is not necessary,
Correct.
that there may be better, maybe more equal protections under the special use permit process.
Yes, sir.
But those recommendations are not going away with this, correct?
Well, the only thing I wonder is that by creating absolute distances and dimensions, that whether or not you may, in any given circumstance, lose leverage to require equal or greater setbacks. And that's a concern I would have. But and not to mention, does this affect any other existing situations? Create any nonconformities?
We looked into the possibility of creating nonconformities and I'm not aware of any at this time.
Because the setbacks and the buffer are consistent with whatever the residential setbacks to a commercial zone would be.
But they're different for restaurants and drive-throughs, right?
What's that?
It's a different dimension, correct, for,
Drive-throughs have to be a certain distance away from residential properties.
so they're
Already, I think
100 feet from
100
residential
It's 100 feet from residential within this, yes,
and 50 from PUDs under this.
yes.
So it's a different standard there. Okay.
And I think what the conclusion, if you notice, it's not a recommendation, it's a conclusion. I mean, Wes and I have talked about this, but want to clarify, Wes?
Yes, sir. This was following the advice of the town attorney. It's my best explanation.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to take it a step farther and think that the town attorney felt a little bit of liability if the town presented this ZTA and we are having a property owner present the ZTA, not the town. So I would stand by my second to Robert's motion.
And my understanding is that really we're just adding plan unit developments. Since the zoning is consistent to the same recommendations as a residential zoning district.
That in addition to other, from restaurants, drive-through facilities, small planned unit developments, when they abut mixed-use group developments, The next to last paragraph on the first page of the staff report is, those are all the different uses that are touched.
I'm curious about the reduction in the distance for PUDs, for drive-throughs.
Say that again.
I'm curious about the reduction of the minimum distance for adjacent to PUDs. Why did you reduce it to 50 feet rather than just leaving it at 100 for other residential districts?
Just following the other 50-foot established setback.
But Wes, the ZTA that's before us tonight, 2304, was word for word what 2302 was, correct?
That's correct.
Prepared by staff and attorney,
Correct.
right?
Yes, sir.
And I mean, if they were to file a site plan, if you recommend this for approval and they file a site plan tomorrow, this is, in my opinion, it's null and void. I'm going to withdraw it. I mean, it's for the protection of getting this in case nothing's done in the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Or we're just sitting around wondering what's going to happen and what the town can do. I would appreciate, and we do, trust me, appreciate everything the town has done and for our situation and trying to put the most restrictive setbacks and requirements. And I believe wholeheartedly that you can try to accomplish that. But for us, there's if you could guarantee and say we can do this, then I wouldn't be sitting here.
We can't.
I know. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you all.
Correct. Well, Wes, I mean, we're still, there's a motion and a second, and we're still discussing it. But Wes, can I get you to pull up the final version that was adopted by town council for mixed use group development? That was adopted by town council 5/19/22.
So what was adopted is here. Starting here, number 11,
Right.
A through K.
A through K. Isn't it A through K?
Yes, sir.
The last two items are J and K. And this was when this board approved mixed-use group development of commercial and residential buildings. Town council approved it, and it became an ordinance on May 19th, 2022. Item J says no building or other facility such as parking spaces, incinerators, trash collection areas, etc., shall be located nearer than 50 feet to boundaries of residential districts. K says where a mixed-use group development abuts a residential zone, a buffer of dense vegetative planting or natural vegetation is required. See requirements in section 36207 D8. That was our intent to address, and it was agreed upon by the applicant for our first mixed-use project in Southern Shores. Everybody sitting up here felt that that was protection for adjoining residential areas. My question is a residential district a residential zoning district?
Yes, sir.
It is specifically a residential zoning district. You don't have to put zoning in the middle of residential and district.
Well, we are in the ZTA, I say we, in the proposed language, it does attempt to clean up and make that consistent and use district instead of zone.
But district could also be area.
It's residential district, residential zone, and the ZTA, it tries to clean it up and refers to residential district.
But not residential zoning district.
It's the same thing. Same thing.
Is there anywhere in the ordinance that defines what residential districts are versus commercial districts?
In the intent and description of the districts, where it will say, you know, residential, the intent is to provide for low density development. But if we go to, and each district has its own intent and description. But if you go in definitions, I don't believe there is a definition of residential district or residential zone.
What the point I'm trying to make is the applicant that generated this mixed use group development, the very first one in Southern Shores, it happens to be in your backyard.
Mhm.
The applicant and the planning board and the town council all thought the same thing, that residential district meant residential area. You are a residential area as far as I'm concerned. And until it says it's a residential zoning district, RS10 or RS1 residential zoning district, I think of it as an area. And in items A through K, that the applicant that generated this mixed use, they thought that too.
Yes, until we were shown a site plan that said we were not in the residential area. We were zone
Correct.
commercial with the buildings and parking lot going right up to our back door with no vegetative buffer, every tree stripped, in a parking lot in a 4-story apartment or condo building 30 feet from our back door.
Right. So if I may, this all goes back to the inaccurateness or the error in our zoning map. Everyone, I think what you're getting at is saying we were under the impression, the board was under the impression that the entire, all of Southern Shores Landing was a residential zone or district, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
The ordinance refers to it as zone in this section in K. And it was determined eventually and discovered that it is not. It is zone commercial, therefore
Yeah.
that does not apply.
Well, and I think you're exactly right. And, you know, in the true sense of the word, these folks don't have a leg to stand on unless they get, you know, some aggressive help from the town. The applicant that started this ball rolling agreed to these conditions. And there were actually 2 more conditions on there that the planning board put that did not make it to town council, that actually gave the applicant 27,000 more square feet of hard structure than our recommendation was. And I think it would be disingenuous of the first applicant to push the issue and go straight up to no setback, which they're
I mean, that's only
entitled.
what we were presented with, which is,
Well, I know.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I mean, if they would, you know, agree to that, then, and if that was the, you know, the whole part of the process, we wouldn't be sitting here having this discussion. We're not asking for anything to stop building. We're not asking about what they're doing. We just want the 50-foot of trees that it's, if you measure from our property line to that tree line, it's almost 50 feet and it's been there since that property's been there all the way around.
You want what the intention of,
Of what we
Right
would be
there.
afforded as being a residential neighborhood, saying it's in the land use plan, it's been
Yeah.
there for 15 years. It's in the zoning map. It's
Well-
in the Dare County tax records. You know, it is, you know, like, if it walks like a duck, talks like a dog, it's a duck.
Yeah.
And again, it's nobody's fault. We're not trying to put blame on anybody. We're just trying to protect ourselves as a community as many ways as possible. And if that was the intent, which I was not aware of, then, and you guys can uphold that standard, that's great.
Intent doesn't stand up too well in the courts.
That's right.
But intent with the applicant moving forward with his project might go a long way in making things work good for the applicant rather than, we get the magnifying glasses out.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not making a threat, but the town does have some standing in this, I would think. So in my mind, with Robert's motion, my second, I mean, I've kind of hogged the conversation here, but we should vote to move this to a vote at least and give some protection, what minimal protection it is, to the applicant. Anybody, Michael?
I just want to clarify one thing. The underlying zoning, the correct zoning, it's zoned commercial and residential.
No, you're referring to Southern Shores Landing?
Yeah.
It is entirely commercial
Okay.
zoning.
Now, see, I would debate that. Because somebody in the town had to adopt the land use plan, the zoning map, and somebody in the town of Southern Shores had to send it over to Dare County.
Dare County now shows that it's commercial. They changed it.
When did they change it?
I don't know.
I mean, every house listed, if you click on the tax record, it says RS10, high density residential. Now, I'm just saying, because they couldn't find a piece of paper from 16 years ago that says we were RS10, anybody sitting up there, you can't tell me that it just arbitrarily showed up in 4 different places. So, and I understand y'all are trying to help us out as best you can, and that's what we want. So whatever we can do to move forward for that, that's what we're all for.
Okay.
Prior to 2005, it was shown as commercial. In the staff report, we explained the history of it after doing the research. It was 2005, it was shown commercial, and then somehow we have not been able to figure out how or why, but the zoning map showed RS10 for 2/3 of Southern Shores Landing.
So Southern Shores Landing was approved prior to 2005.
Yes.
And prior to
About that time. It was approved, it was approved in 2005. The zoning map 2007 shows 2/3 of Southern Shores Landing is RS10 residential and the remaining 1/3 is commercial.
So, but when it was approved, they were only allowed in residential districts.
That is correct. PUDs were allowed in the RS10
But it was
district,
actually zoned commercial at the
but it
time.
was actually zoned commercial. And then they removed.
It's a mess.
They removed PUDs from RS10 permitted use, special use, conditional use, and put it only in the commercial use. So instead of changing the zoning map, they changed the ordinance. Clear as mud.
Right.
Well, we have a
The
motion
only
and a
thing
second.
that I will say is that I think that this is a little bit of protection. The special use permit process certainly should give you some.
Sure, and I 100% agree, 100%.
However, you can't count on who's elected this month or this year or whatever, or 10 years from now.
We're just trying to cover all our bases.
I think
Understood. And
this helps some.
Those last two items are, agreed upon in good faith by the applicant who proposed those last two items. That didn't come from us.
Right. Okay.
So, got a motion and a second. There's a lady back here that would like to say something to you.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, first of all, my house was built in 2004, so it had to have been approved before 2005, right? But what I was told was that there was a mistake made when the dentist office went in, that's next to our development, and that's when it was, the error happened, and that's how we switched from residential to commercial. And I don't feel that we should be penalized for a mistake that had nothing to do with people who bought residential and it intend to protect our residential property.
Wes, do you have anything?
I have not heard or found out about the error at the dentist office. That's the first I've heard of that part, but,
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. We're going to vote this time. Any more discussion? Everybody know what the motion is? The motion is to approve the CTA as written.
recommend approval.
I mean, as recommended. We're going to recommend to go to town council,
Yes, sir.
this CTA. All right, all in favor of that recommendation, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None seen.
Thank you.
Anybody want to take a break or order a pizza? Yeah, I can keep strolling. Lot width, Wes, we're rearranging the order here, so
Yes, sir. This is ETA 2303 that I started to read earlier, and I apologize again for that.
well,
I'll just summarize.
yeah, can you, I would say, summarize analysis, and can you read the last paragraph on page 1? If that makes sense.
Yes, sir. At the April 17, 2023 Planning Board meeting, the board considered ZTA 2303, drafted March 31st, 23, a request to amend the town's minimum lot width requirements on all of the residential districts so that the requirements are unambiguous as directed by the town council at the March 21st meeting. The board asked town staff to revise the proposed language to reduce the potential impact of rendering some lots nonconforming and to remove right angles from the definition of lot width. Following that meeting, town staff met with Chairperson Ward and drafted another new definition of lot width in section 36-57, which was drafted April 28, 23, which is the horizontal distance between the side lot lines of a lot. The new proposed amendments also include amendments to sections 202D2, 203D2, 204D2, 205D2, and 206D2 that establish that the minimum lot width is measured from the front lot line, period, from the front lot line. Town staff has determined that the proposed amendments are consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan. However, town staff recommends approval of ZTA 2303 as it was initially proposed when considered at your last planning board meeting and dated March 31, 23. And if I may, real quick, going back to that on GIS, I think there was some confusion about the right angles. So I'm bringing up Ocean Boulevard. We have lots shown here, 100 feet wide at the front lot line.
Can you zoom that a little bit, Wes?
Yes, sir. I'll go to this one. The front lot line is here. This is right of way in town, or state right of way rather, from here over here. But this is your front lot line. This is the side lot line. This is the other side lot line. This is the rear lot line. In the original ZTA 2303 language, we were saying that the lot width is measured from the front property line at right angles where it meets the side lot line. So that would be right here and right here. 100 feet at this point where the front lot line meets the two side lot lines. And you carry that width of 100 feet all the way to the rear property line. So yes, we do also understand that there were some concerns about, well, what about a lot that is 100 feet wide from the front lot line where it meets the side lot lines, but let's say it goes to 90 feet in width back here at the rear lot line. According to, based on the proposed language in the original 2303 ZTA, that lot would be non-conforming. However, town staff feels like in order to reduce the ambiguity in our current lot width and lot width requirements, we feel that this is necessary. And if the planning board and town council disagrees or is not 100% happy with it, then we can always come back and fix it. But right now, we feel like the original language in 2303 gives us the ability to make sure that recombinations or subdivisions that may not be what the town are interested in can't go forward based on ambiguity in the town code. That concludes my staff report.
Questions for Wes?
Does the town not have any minimum frontage requirement?
30-foot frontage minimum.
So that, I mean, this kind of exempts that.
It would, we would have to, yes, we would have to go back and correct that if this were put into place.
What about, is there a provision for cul-de-sacs that would allow for those?
We don't have any lot width, we don't have anything specific to cul-de-sac lots with respect to lot width or lot dimensions.
So this would basically, I mean, for the time being, at least preclude cul-de-sac lots.
Unless there's a way to make it 100 feet wide and have right angles, but I doubt that could happen. But yes, that's correct. Right now, if this was adopted, the original language in 2303, it would not allow, and nor would the other.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's 100 feet wide.
a way to correct that is, or address that is provision that allows for, except for,
Cul-de-sac,
yeah.
yes. And I don't think, I mean, obviously, there are cul-de-sac lots in the town.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, what we are recommending is that we at least try to close the door, so to speak, on the possibility of subdivisions and recombinations that we're not in favor of.
It's not a matter of trying to get every lot in Southern Shores into conformity, because truthfully, my lot would be non-conforming. It's 100 feet at the street, and on my canal, I'm at about 98. But if it's not 100 all the way through, then that's the way it is.
And
I mean, I disagreed with that when Wes and I got together and tried to beat out something that, I felt like was used, less verbiage and still got the same result.
Well, I mean, alternatively, if that's confusing, trust me, I've tried to work on lot width provisions for the same reason for a long time. You could say through the entire depth of the lot.
that we do have a definition of lot depth, that is in there. And for simplicity, I mean, I'd also considered, instead of saying at right angles, you could say where it intersects with the side lot lines. But I mean, as long as, I think at this point, we would prefer what's being proposed and what's been suggested by the town attorney and town staff. And if we want to go back and make changes, we could do that.
Which one is that, just to confirm?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Which one are you?
We are recommending 2303 as drafted in March,
Okay.
the
What-
March 31st, 2023 draft.
To clarify, the date is 3/31/23 on that one.
Yeah, it would be in the top right corner.
And what Wes and I were working towards, which is also in your packet, I mean, there's two ZTAs. The date is 4/28/23. And that was with Wes and I trying to hammer out something. He showed it to staff, attorney. They said their language was more bulletproof than what Wes and I came up with, so we defer to staff,
The main
attorneys.
Yeah, the main concern with the one that you and I worked on is that we would end up with most likely a lot of pie-shaped lots. Because there's no requirement. It's just a 100 feet at the front.
can
and then-
taper.
And then would go all the way back. It could go back all they wanted.
Any more discussion on the ZTA 2303 version, what is it? 3/31/23. Any more discussion?
I mean, I think somebody's going to want to come back at some point, right?
What's that?
Somebody's going to want to come back to it to maybe more thoroughly, because 3/31/3, if I'm reading it correctly, is going to require a lot to never reduce less than the required lot width.
That's correct.
All the way through.
All the way through.
I wasn't in favor of that, but our attorney says that if you're looking to get rid of a perceived ambiguity, which we have been through, then this is bulletproof according to our attorney.
Well,
I don't agree, but.
There's thousands of different ways to cut
Oh, yeah.
it. And you could drive yourself crazy trying to write a bulletproof lot width provision. And so,
Well, we're also taking it from the lot line rather than
Building setback line.
the building setback line, which also makes it the perceived ambiguity 0.
We can come back and address it to include, make it more inclusive, especially cul-de-sac lots or lots that are less than 100 feet wide all the way to its depth. But at this time, we feel like it's important to go ahead and get this adopted.
I get it. I'm not opposed to that.
Okay.
Why?
So that it reduces the ambiguity in the town code.
I don't think the town code has ambiguity any longer.
That could be your opinion, yes, sir.
Well, we differ of opinion, but this takes rid of any perceived ambiguity that's out there. Because if we didn't do anything, then we're left with perceived ambiguity.
So
right?
what about the 30-foot lot width that's required?
We don't have a 30-foot lot width, but a 30-foot,
I'm sorry,
the 30-foot of street.
From the street.
30 feet of street, 30 feet of street frontage.
Minimum.
If it doesn't,
This is still, that would still be in compliance with this. This actually, like Michael said, supersedes that because now we're saying 100 feet instead of 30 feet.
so the 30 feet doesn't mean anything anymore.
Not at this point, no, sir. So we would probably go back and take that out, but.
That 30 feet
If it
was-
were to stay this way, but if we were to revise it and allow cul-de-sac lots, then the 30 feet, I think, would still be in play.
So why don't we have the whole ordinance here?
The whole ordinance.
Yeah, we're talking about, we'll come back and do some more, and we'll come back and do some more, we'll come back and do some more.
Right.
Why?
It's our option.
Because at this point, we haven't been able to craft it the way we want it, but this right here solves the issue that we see exists.
I don't get it. I mean, the town is full of cul-de-sac lots, it's odd-shaped lots. Some, they're 2-acre lots. There are all different kinds of lots. They don't look like that.
I'm not
They
disagreeing.
don't look like the.
Well, that,
We don't disagree, and and that's what I'm saying. We can certainly come back and revisit cul-de-sacs and other lots that aren't 100 feet wide.
what, we're not trying to bring lots into conformity, Robert. We're trying to
You're trying to
preclude,
prevent anyone else from building on lots that are irregular.
or non-conforming. To subdivide or to
create irregular shaped lots.
or recombine lots into nonconformity. And that's just what this is. It's not trying to bring, cul-de-sac lots into conformity. I mean, I'll vote for this and it turns my lot nonconforming.
Go to the end of Wild Pony on your GIS.
Both streets, actually.
Yeah. There you go. Zoom in there a little bit. Yeah, so there's 6 cul-de-sac lots there that aren't developed. So the owner of these 6 lots can't sell any of them, is that right?
No, they're non-conforming established lots.
Yeah.
So they would have
legally
rights
non-conforming
as
lots.
non-conforming lots.
He
But-
couldn't combine
But
2 lots and get 3 out of it. That's what we're trying to preclude. And there are situations in town that quite possibly could do that. And, we would turn a flag lot situation into something that we don't want to move forward.
You
on.
don't want flag lots?
I
Is that
don't
what you're
think,
saying?
I don't think the town is served by flag lots. you know, that's my opinion, but,
We have a few of those that were platted out from the very
absolutely.
beginning.
But there are some parcels left that could get creative and get the minimum square footage. And right now, if we do nothing, could move what I think is a static line that could be moved back and get 3 lots out of 2. I don't know, but this does not let that occur. And I think the town wants to,
If you have the square footage, if a person has the square footage, why would you not want them to be able to develop their property? The square footage is the square footage is the.
it's
is
not
the
about,
thing.
it's not about developing their property. It's about getting smaller lots. We want to move away from nonconformity, I think. Isn't that an objective in the town?
But you're saying if the square footage, if they have the square footage to subdivide,
It has 2 requirements. It also says 100 feet lot width minimum.
from the building setback line.
Where's the building setback line? Wherever you want it?
Sure.
I disagree.
Well, your
we're
setback
taking-
line.
we're taking-
Where is your setback line?
Where's my setback line?
It's about 50, 60 feet from the street. Your next door neighbor might be 25 feet. Building setback line is determined by the person building the house.
I disagree. I think it's a static line that is established, and that's what the ordinance was for the building setback line. Now,
That's not
it's
what it says
going,
in court.
it's going to lot line, not setback, lot line. It's unambiguous. And that's what town staff is, recommending. Believe me, Wes and I talked about this quite a bit, and the 331-23 was not my first choice. I'm more for a 428-23, but
Well, the minimum 20,000 square foot requirement creates low density.
I agree with that.
Okay, so if somebody can subdivide their property and have 2 20,000 square foot lots, you still have low density. What's wrong with that?
I'm not going to get in an argument with you over interpretation, but
I just,
I think that the town is better served with 100-foot width as a guideline when it comes to cutting up lots and making multiple lots non-conforming. I just think that this takes care of it.
But you couldn't create nonconformities today.
that's right.
You can't.
You can't subdivide.
And to create a
correct. Non-conforming. No, that's correct.
And, I mean, I know this is my first meeting, but I've kind of lost the plot on this one in terms of what the end goal is. Is there
Well-
something you can,
Have you seen the no 50-foot lot signs around town? I mean,
perhaps,
the relevancy here is that we're trying to bring more lots into conformity rather than non-conformity. And, like Robert said, 20,000 square feet sounds good. It should be, what everybody shoots for. But the other condition, the other dimensional requirement has to have a lot width minimum. And at 100 feet from lot line to lot line,
is there an area you can show that is representative of the concern?
Sure. Go to Skyline Road.
on one. of
Maybe turn the
any of
aerial
those.
off.
I'm sorry?
If you turn the aerial off, go down to the map, the folded map, you should be able to turn it off.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
There are
Okay.
4 lots there
Yep.
that were created out of 4 non-conforming lots and an extra parcel.
Yep.
And the reason that the way it was done is that there is 100-foot width at different points in those lots. And that's where the building setback line is established.
Yep.
And after this was done, it was determined that we needed something else.
So how many dwellings can be built on that?
4.
With how many accessory dwelling units potentially?
4.
So that's 8 dwelling units on that piece of property, and you say that that's reducing density? I disagree.
I didn't say that reduced density.
Well, you did. I mean, by subdividing it, you're
Look at the
reducing
lot, look
density.
at the lot just south
Yeah, but
of
that's,
Skyline Road
sure.
and the one next to it.
They're all over the place on Skyline because it's one of the first platted.
It was the first.
Yeah. I'm
So how many lots were there before?
4 non-conforming lots.
So they had the rights to build on those 4 lots originally.
We have,
An individual could have built on them,
I
but
disagree.
you couldn't sell them.
I disagree. The lots, we have an ordinance that states if you have a non-conforming lot under single ownership that's adjacent to another
They have to be
non-conforming lot.
combined.
Correct.
Correct.
prior to sale or development, right?
Yes, sir.
Prior to sale of or development, they have to be recombined into an even number of, or
One or more
one or
conforming.
more, correct?
Well, usually those provisions, they're combined de facto, automatically. They're not, they don't have 2 legal lots under the town zone.
I don't know.
I don't understand. So typically, let me.
If you have 2 adjoining lots that are non-conforming, then for zoning purposes, they're considered combined.
That's what I said. The town, we have a specific ordinance that states that if you propose development on 2 or more
Gotcha.
lots, you have to recombine. We also have one that says if you own, even if it's non-conforming with respect to area or width, they have to be recombined.
Right.
We changed this, what Mr. Chairperson Ward was going to earlier was, a few years ago, we had a property where there was a duplex that sat on 2 50-foot wide lots. That duplex was demolished and 2 new single-family dwellings were built, 1 on each lot. Because we had language in the ordinance at that time. However, it wasn't clear enough to say that they had to recombine those 2 lots. So in order to prevent that from happening going forward, the town, the planning board, we spent a lot of time and effort drafting the ordinance to what it is today, saying if you have non-conforming lots adjacent to one another, they have to be recombined.
And then there's a difference of opinion of what the frontage is or where it's measured from. And it became a perceived ambiguity that this thing right here before us tonight.
I mean, you're going to have, even on a curved street, you're going to have a challenge. You know, you're going to have a lot on one side of the street that may meet the width and a lot on the other that doesn't. I mean, I think the biggest concern, I mean, yeah, that can happen. But if you make this change, how many lots are you making non-conforming?
We
Well,
will,
mine would be one of them, but I don't care. I mean, it's
Well, but
legally non-conforming.
you're still-
What difference does it make?
I'm not prepared to do that to other people that I don't know how many we're doing it to.
What is the ramification of a legally non-conforming lot?
it depends. It depends on if it's adjacent to another non-conforming lot under same ownership. But otherwise, if it's a standalone non-conforming lot that's not subject to recombination with other adjoining lots, they can be developed as long as they still meet setback and lot coverage requirements. And again, I just want to restate, there are issues that may come out of this. However, we feel like this gives us more time to address the concerns.
Can you, what about a provision, for instance, that this applies to lots that are created after a certain date.
We have, there's a section in the recombination requirements that refers to lots after 1980. I can't remember the date. But you're saying that what if there are cul-de-sacs or some other sort of lot that's created after 2023 or?
No, what I'm saying is that have the lot width provision. So for instance, R1, minimum lot width 100 feet measured at the building setback line. Lots created after June, whatever, 2023, shall be subject to a 100-foot lot width requirement measured at the front lot line.
I see what you're saying now. Yeah, and that's kind of what the other section does I was referring to. We wouldn't be opposed to that.
I mean, if this is a stopgap measure, I think that's the only way I would feel comfortable doing it, because there's no commitment that it can come back. Sure, we trust that it would, but I think you render a lot of lots non-conforming, and I think without knowing how many lots we affect, I think that would be a bad course.
So what you're suggesting or commenting on is in all of in 202, 203, 204, 205, 206, D2, it would state from the front lot line at right angles to the rear lot line and somehow tie in the adoption date of this ZTA.
Yeah, I think you keep the original statement, period, and then add the new statement qualified as applicable only to lots created after this date.
Either that or add something in our nonconformities chapter or section.
Yeah, that lots lawfully created prior to June, whatever, 2023, that, met lot width are not considered non-conforming for that purpose. Something to that effect.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's pretty much this, I mean, it's the same. It doesn't really do anything because it's only going to be new lots created that are affected by this thing.
That's not true. Every lot that exists that doesn't meet the 100-foot width requirement at the street is non-conforming.
Yeah, this would exclude, you're saying this would create an exception for
Yes.
lots created prior to XXX23.
So moving forward from June, it would be effective. Moving backwards from June, it would
The
be-
rules wouldn't change.
Yes.
It's a similar situation I can think of is this, the town used to have 10-foot side setback requirements. Then in 2000, it was set to 15. The ordinance they created in the nonconformity section saying if you add on to your structure and the setback was built, let's say it's 11 feet from the property line, they still wanted you to be able to say you can do an addition, but you just can't encroach any further than that 11 feet from the property line instead of having to abide by the 15. That's something, it's kind of similar to what you're saying.
But there's a date in there, isn't there?
Not with respect to that.
To setback from going from 10 to 15.
There's no specific date to
There
that.
isn't.
No, they didn't put a date in it, but that's what it's doing in essence.
Well, that's. I mean, is
We
that something
would have no objections to adding to each of those, something to the effect of only applicable to lots created after XXXXXX.
That would be my motion.
I'll second that. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll call for a vote. All in favor of Michael's motion to add a date that would be appropriate moving forward?
It would be the adoption date.
Or
I'm thinking it would be the
adoption
adoption date, if adopted,
date, If adopted.
if adopted.
All in favor of recommending approval of this and sending to town council, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
No. Motion carries 3-1. All right. Well, that gets us through, lost my agenda. Okay. Public comment. Anybody left? Still awake right there. Would you care to speak at all anymore? Last chance. Okay. All right, planning board member comments. John?
Yeah, I have a comment. I'm glad some members of town council are here
Absolutely.
to hear this. This evening, Casey Barnell tried to get this planning board to make a choice between a permitted use with a number of conditions and a special use where he seemed to indicate, well, you don't need a lot of conditions because that'll be dealt with at the review process. I disagree with that completely. I think it's extremely important in a zoning ordinance, whether it's permitted or special use, that you have as many conditions in there that are applicable. And tonight I brought with me the Bible, David Owens' Land Use Law in North Carolina. And he has, in addressing special use permits, he has a paragraph that's entitled Adequate Guiding Standards. And I'm going to make a copy of this and send it to Wes, and hopefully he will distribute it. But it basically says if there are no standards, or if the standards provided are so general, then the courts may look at you as legislating something, and they'll just consider it completely invalid. So you need guiding standards. And if this thing about workforce housing goes forward, or anything else goes forward in this town, I think it's important in a special use permit. In the zoning, if it's a special use, include standards where you can.
Makes perfect sense to me.
It's your cousin.
Do you have an autographed this
No,
one?
I don't.
For proper funds, I could get you one. Okay, Michael, do you have anything?
No, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for participating and jumping into the fire. I really
Sure thing.
appreciate it. Ed? Good. Robert? Okay, Wes, announcements.
The next meeting will be June 19th, 5 o'clock here in the Pitt Center. At this point, we may have commercial design standards ETA for you. We shall see.
Okay, other than that, nothing else on,
Nothing on the radar at the moment, no, sir.
Okay.
That could change, but right now, that's what we're looking at potentially.
okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we adjourn this lengthy meeting. Can I get a second? Ed seconds. All in favor? Aye. Twice. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah.